Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp. And those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Transparency advocates say coming federal review of the Access to Information Act should be overseen by an independent panel, not the government, to avoid the pitfalls of the last such exercise. Joining us to discuss all of this is Duff Conacher, founder of Democracy Watch. Duff, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's talk about the last time this was done, this review. It was back in, I believe it was 2022. Tell us about that review and why that didn't cut mustard.
Well, the review was done internally by government officials, and that's like asking a bunch of foxes how they think that the security system for the chickens should be strengthened, because government officials don't want more transparency, because that means more accountability for how they use the public's money and decisions that they make. And of course, cabinet ministers were overseeing those officials, and they don't want more transparency either. So they were just, deeply conflicted, those officials doing the review, and that's why an independent review is needed. Not that we don't know already what changes are needed to the Act. It's been well documented in several task forces and public consultations with Democracy Watch, other citizen groups and experts. Even the information commissioners across the country have called for key reforms. So we know the list of reforms needed, but a review does have to take place, so it should be independent of government officials.
All right, so it's been 40 years since this law has been overhauled, which is, that in and of itself it speaks a lot to a lot's changed in 40 years, right?
Yeah, and even when it began, people passed laws. It was a new law, and it was called the Access to Information Act. So everyone thinks, everyone's going to follow the spirit of the law. But actually, the name of the act really should be changed to the Guide to Keeping Information Secret that the public has a right to know, because it has full of loopholes, and those loopholes are exploited and abused regularly. And one of the main reasons is there's no penalty for violating any of the provisions in the Act. Well, if you have a law where there's no penalty, there's a little incentive to follow the law. And that's what's been shown over the last 40 plus years, is that it's really just a guide to keeping information secret and abusing those loopholes that allow for excessive government secrecy, and no one faces any penalty for it.
Okay.
So that's why we see this legacy, and really it's not the Access to Information Act. It needs to be turned into an Access to Information Act.
All right, who does it benefit more, elected lawmakers or the public sector itself, or who does it benefit more right now?
Both government officials, government employees, and who can cover up wrongdoing, waste of the public's money from decisions they've made, and ministers as well. And the government overall. So really one of the biggest loopholes are that advice to cabinet ministers can be hidden. So they just label almost everything advice to cabinet ministers and then hide it. And then the second problem is delay. You can just easily delay. There's just multiple reports of people waiting for things for years that the law says are supposed to be required within a month. And there's no penalty for that delay at all. The Liberals made one change in 2018, giving the Information Commissioner the power to order the release of information. But again, there's no penalty, and by the time the commissioner gets around to ordering the release of information, because the commissioner has a huge backlog of complaints to deal with, the government institution's able to delay something for a couple of years. And for a government, that's a huge advantage. If there's some wrongdoing that they want to cover up because an election's coming up over the next year, they can easily do that. And then voters go to the polls not knowing about the wrongdoing. And that's not an Access to Information Act. That is a guide to keeping information secret that the public has a right to know law. And it needs to be changed into a real Access to Information Act. And it's long overdue, decades overdue. These changes were called for by a huge coalition 25 years ago.
Okay, so governments campaign on these, and then they get in power and they don't act on it. And that goes beyond just this Liberal government. Stephen Harper did the same thing, did he not?
He did. And the improvement he made was he added about 50 government institutions that weren't even covered by the law, were exempt completely from being transparent.
Wow.
But he didn't strengthen the law itself by closing any loopholes or strengthening the enforcement system or putting in place penalties. As I mentioned, the Trudeau Liberals gave the commissioner order-making power, but the Trudeau Liberals' promise was that we'll have open government by default, transparency by default. That will be the position of the government, and they just
that never happens.
So many,
you can't rely on that. That's garbage. I mean, that just never happens, right?
And the Carney Liberals didn't even include a promise in their platform.
Wow.
Carney was asked by a reporter during the election, towards the end of the election campaign, what do you think about the problems with the Access to Information Act? And he said, my advisors advised me not to talk about these kind of government accountability measures. But to his credit, he went on to say, I've been an outsider outside the government using the Act, and no others have, and there's many problems. And he made a sort of half commitment to looking at strengthening it. But they didn't put anything in their platform. So if a politician is not going to put a promise in the platform, the platform set out the priorities of a party and the party leader, and it's clearly not his priority. And he's shown that he's very committed to secrecy. He's hiding his own financial investments that cause conflicts of interest for him. And he's been fine with that completely unethical scheme that will likely continue to hide what business investments he has and the conflicts of interest that he has because of those financial interests. So he hasn't shown a real commitment to transparency himself about his own personal investments and the conflicts of interest around them. And so how committed is he going to be? I don't know. But at least we need an independent review. Then we'll have a strong report, and that will put pressure on the government. The opposition parties too, though. We're in a minority government. They could introduce a bill and pass it. They have a majority of MPs in the House. So why not get together, all of them work together, pass a bill, and put pressure on the government to dare them to try and stop it.
Is there an ombudsman or some type of appeal process in place?
Yeah, the Information Commissioner has been in place right back to the beginning of the Act. Not chosen in an independent way like they should be. The Cabinet does a secretive process that the Cabinet controls and can easily pick a lapdog for that position. So that's a problem. As I mentioned, the Liberals gave the Commissioner the power to make orders to release information. That was an improvement, but again, there's such a backlog that still any federal government institution or minister can delay a release of information for years instead of disclosing it within a month as the law requires. And again, the Commissioner can only say, the rules were broken, you should disclose the information. They can't penalize anyone. Well, people jaywalk, even though it's illegal, because no police officer is going to hand you a ticket for jaywalking. Yeah. You don't get people following laws if there's no penalty for breaking the law. And so we need strong penalties. People should be suspended without pay. If they retire or resign to try and escape accountability, there should be a clawback of their pension. There have to be real penalties for keeping information from the public that the public has a right to know. And until we have those, we're going to continue to see this law violated most of the time. Might
this just be a low priority electorally?
No, I think lots of people understand it, and it's one of the areas where the media actually gives a lot of coverage, because the media, of course, has an interest in transparency because they're trying to inform the public. One of the problems is secrecy works. The media doesn't cover secrecy because there's nothing to cover, right? And that's the media's attitude towards it. There's no scandal that's been revealed. The scandal's covered up, so we can't report on it. Yeah. And the media really should be reporting on secrecy more, and how the secrecy is really the scandal, and that the public's being denied a right to know information that they pay for, that they have a right to. And if the media started covering how excessive secrecy covers up wrongdoing more, that would really help raise this issue and put more pressure on politicians from all parties to change the law.
And I would think that the more secrecy there is, and the more redacted documents, and the less effective this is when people request information, the more indifferent people become, and it proliferates, and more people just check out.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know how much their delay is, because when the media does report something, when they finally get it, the headline is what they've found. And, buried in the 15th, 20th paragraph of the story is, this took 2 years to get out when it should have taken, a month or two. And so we've been urging, as Democracy Watch, have been urging the media for the past several years to start covering the secrecy. Do a story about the fact that you've been waiting for a year. That should be a headline, that you've had to wait for a year for information that the law says should have been disclosed within a month or two. And cover the secrecy as the story itself. And so a lot of people think the act is working because they see headlines saying, we got this information out through the Access to Information Act. But the headline should have been, while the reporter was waiting for the information, they should have done, and their media outlet should have done a couple of stories about the fact that they were waiting, and that this information was being covered up illegally, in violation of the law, during the whole time they were waiting. So that's a problem. People think the act is working because they only see stories about information disclosed. They rarely see stories about information being kept secret. And that's why the government does it. They know that secrecy works. It helps to cover up scandals so that they can run in the next election without the public knowing about their scandalous behavior. And they also know that the media is not covering secrecy. And so they can get away with it. So that has to change. And hopefully the media will start covering secrecy more and more. The Globe and Mail did a great series called Secret Canada, where they really featured a lot of different stories and the problems with getting information from government institutions. But other media outlets haven't followed suit. They still only cover information that gets disclosed, and they need to start covering secrecy as the real scandal, not just at the federal level. Provinces, municipalities, the government institutions at every level of government, all the laws across the country have the same loopholes, and they're all abused to keep information secret that the public has a right to know. And so there's many, many secrecy stories that could be done by the media regularly.
Any response from the letter?
No, not yet. It was just sent a few days ago, and we're going to be following up and pushing all the party leaders. Again, because the Liberals are in power, have been for 10 years. It really is their fault that they didn't keep their promise, and that the level of secrecy, according to information commissioners, is worse than ever. Not just at the federal level, but across Canada. So the other parties in power at the provincial level are also to blame. But, we're going to be pressuring all the party leaders because, again, it's a minority government. The opposition parties, Conservatives and NDP and Bloc and Greens, they have a majority of seats in Parliament. So they can introduce a bill themselves, work all together, and pass it through the House and send it on to the Senate. And the Liberals cannot stop it because they have a minority. So all the parties the opposition parties, we've had a minority government since 2019, and the opposition parties are also to blame. They could have done this. They could have strengthened the law themselves in the past 6 years, and they should act now. They shouldn't be waiting on the Liberals and just, they do this because they say, oh, the Liberal government, secretive. But if you have the power to change that, it's also your fault for the fact that the excessive secrecy continues.
Always great, Duff. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Todd, and I'll keep you up to date as this develops.
Please do. Take care. Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch, co-founder. According to the Canadian Cancer Society, every 3 minutes someone in Canada hears the words, "You have cancer." For Dr. Melanie Keats, these words are more than a statistic. They are a significant part of her life's journey. That when we come back. According to the Canadian Cancer Society, every 3 minutes someone in Canada hears the words, "You have cancer." For Dr. Melanie Keats, these words are more than a statistic. They're a significant part of her life's journey. Dr. Melanie Keats joins me to talk about this, co-director of the Physical Activity and Cancer Lab. Dr. Keats, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I guess we'd start with your story because it's a pretty impactful one. So share a bit of your story quickly if you can, please.
Yeah, it's a long one, so I'll give you the very abbreviated version. Cancer's been a part of my life since before probably I can even remember. So I was about a year and a half old when my brother died of acute myelodysplastic leukemia. So he was 3 years old when he was diagnosed, and he passed away a month before his 4th birthday. There's been a spattering of cancer throughout my family history, but for myself specifically, I was diagnosed with cancer, a spinal cord astrocytoma, an aggressive tumor of the spine when I was 12. I had bladder cancer when I was 17. I had a recurrence of the spinal cord cancer the year my daughter was born, 2013. And most recently, in 2021, I was diagnosed with stage 4A ovarian cancer. I've had 2 recurrences since that time. And most recently, my father was just diagnosed with stage 4 bladder cancer. And that's a very abbreviated version. The story goes far deeper than that, but yeah.
Okay, so you turn your personal battle into your mission to improve the quality of life for cancer patients through exercise. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that was always valued being active. We played different sports. We had opportunities we spent most of our time outside playing and doing different things. So it's something that I just grew up enjoying, playing different sports, competing against my brother as best as I could. And as going through university and trying to decide what I was going to do with my life, I ended up at the University of Calgary doing a kinesiology degree. And I met a professor there, Carrie Cournier, who was doing some work in the benefits of exercise for individuals with chronic illness. And I did a project with him actually looking at the benefits of exercise for cancer patients and survivors. And it's from there that my interest in the area has blossomed and grown substantially. In the beginning, really looking at the benefits of exercise to help improve quality of life and how people are feeling and functioning during their day. Moving from that to looking more explicitly at how exercise can help prevent cancer, help prevent recurrence of disease, help people recover from treatments, better manage treatments. So the field of exercise oncology has grown substantially over the last 25 to 30 years. I just basically we're teaching people how to move more and reap the benefits of moving more.
How about resources? You could always use more, I'm sure, eh?
Absolutely. So it's one of the things with the programming right now. So our ultimate goal is to make exercise standard of care. There's a wealth of evidence and information showing that exercise is beneficial. I don't think there's too many of us that would disagree with that. But interestingly, unlike with cardiac rehab, exercise is not standard of care in cancer care. So we're trying to build the evidence and, work with our colleagues across the country, across the nation, internationally to demonstrate the benefits of exercise so that it can be taken up by into standard of care, clinical care practice. So right now, the bulk of what we're doing and largely what all of our colleagues across internationally and throughout North America are doing are offering programs through research studies. There are, like in Australia, they have some standard of care programming there. There are some things in the U.S., but there's very little in Canada. The most of the work we do here in Canada is grant-funded, research-based type of activity. So what we really want to do is to be able to have the evidence, to put the evidence forward to healthcare systems and, more broadly across Canada to ensure that anybody that's diagnosed with cancer has the opportunity to engage in an exercise intervention at no cost to themselves.
Right. Okay, so if people want to know more about all this or if they're curious about all this, where's a good spot for them to go to find out more about all of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we actually have a website for us here in Nova Scotia, and it's the www.thepac, so PAC, lab.com. So there's some more information there. There's information on how to contact us there, and yeah, so they can reach out to us that way, and we can provide information on what's available through our lab, through colleagues that we have in and around the province, and just see what fits for them.
Okay, Dr. Keats, interesting. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you.
All right, take care. Dr. Melanie Keats, co-director of the Physical Activity and Cancer Lab. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Ness as well on the other side of the glass, doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.
CJNI FM,
a Rogers radio station.
#1 for breaking news, traffic, and weather. 95.7 News Radio, Halifax.
Halifax homeowners, what's your home really worth? I'm Joanne with Joanne Pullen Realty Group. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, or just wondering what your place could sell for, we don't guess, we strategize. From expert pricing to bold marketing and top-tier negotiation, we're the Halifax team buyers and sellers trust to get it done. Find us on Instagram or visit joannepullen.ca. That's JoannePullin.ca. Let's talk real numbers and real results.
With our busy lives, we don't always have time to deal with computer issues. Hi, I'm Barry Ring, owner of Mac East. If your Mac requires
All right, a fantastic day out there. It's beautiful weather, and but we've got some business to take care of for sure, and we'll talk municipal politics at length today. The mayor of HRM, Andy Fillmore, will join the show at 10:45 to talk about his failed motion to press pause on bike lanes. $100 million and rising is the price tag. It wasn't even close. His council, I think he got 4 votes, including himself, it was 5. So we'll talk to Mayor Fillmore about that, and then we'll open the phone lines between 11 and 12 and get your take on that. Also, we'll be talking stadium. That's right, folks. The stadium is back in the news cycle. Howard Epstein, Friends of Halifax Common, represents that group, will join me in about 15 minutes' time to talk about a new plan, considers what a permanent stadium could look like in downtown Halifax, but says using the same location as a current pop-up facility would bring compromises to the stadium and other nearby groups. And the Wanderers block is where the stadium is now the pop-up stadium, which is basically permanent. It's the stands have been there for about 5-6 years now, if not longer. But of course, the Wanderers soccer team is looking for, and the Halifax Tides women's team want a permanent 8,500 seat stadium with running water, locker rooms, and concession areas that could expand seating in the future. Price tag at least $40 million. So they're looking for public money, and we'll talk to Howard about that, and we'll talk to you about that as well. So lots to get to. Also, the Halifax Regional Municipality has decided to stop sharing information with the public using the X social media platform. Instead, the government says it's switching to the Blue Sky platform. The change is in response to a decision from Regional Council, which followed a review of public feedback and trends in other jurisdictions. So what are your thoughts on this, folks? Is this the right move, or is it a waste of time? And will it ultimately result in a gap in communications? Because those who use X, I've already got emails from people saying they're not going to bother signing up for Blue Sky. They just won't. So I suppose that'll result in a lack of communication with people. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Is it virtue signaling? What's going on with this? And lots of other things you can get to as well. Again, we'll open the phone lines between 11 and 12. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Ness as well on the other side of the glass, the control boards. Doing a fine job as always. All right, let's dive in with our first guest, a Mi'kmaq band that claimed in a lawsuit that Ottawa's lobster fishing rules didn't apply to it has quietly dropped its case. Last December, the lawyer for Sabaganagati Nation told the Nova Scotia Supreme Court the matter was of historic importance and the band was moving to a conclusion to make a deal. But as the deadline of June 16th crept up, the band lawyer sent a letter dropping the matter. Band members had argued their fishery outside of the regular season is permitted by the Marshall decision, but commercial fishers have contended it threatens stocks and ignores that the courts also maintain Ottawa's right to regulate. Colin Sproul joins me, president of the Unified Fisheries Conservation Alliance, a group that represents commercial fishers. Colin, thanks for joining me here in studio. Appreciate it.
Todd, thanks a lot. We appreciate the chance to share our views.
All right. So, what was your response to this?
Well, firstly, I'd just like to point out this is a huge victory for fishing families, given that it's a clear admission by Sipekne'katik First Nation that their rights do not extend to regulating their own illegal out-of-season fishery that damages sustainability for all families that rely on the resource. This case was about Sipekne'kati's allegation that ministers of fisheries do not have the right to stop an illegal fishery, and to see them withdraw is a clear sign that they believe their rights do not extend to those lengths.
They haven't said that, though, publicly. That's your interpretation of this?
Well, that's
safe to say?
That's what this case was about, and if they believe that they could fish lawfully in St. Mary's Bay or in St. Peter's Bay, that they would be doing it this summer. Because of that reason, we expect not to see citizens of Sipekne'katik First Nation poaching lobsters this summer in St. Mary's Bay, St. Peter's Bay, or anywhere else. And I think even more importantly, we need to recognize that the Minister of Fisheries has been liberated to take enforcement action here, given that the nation's claims have been withdrawn. The other thing to recognize is that this is a clear abuse of the courts by Chief Glasgow. This is the second time on the eve of discoveries, a few minutes before the court closed, on the day before she was to be discovered by our lawyers, that they stopped moving forward on the case, this time ending it completely. So there's been a lack of respect for the court process, and there's certainly been a lack of respect for the lobster resource by the chief and by people who are poaching.
So what was coming up? What was June 16th? What was the deadline about?
That on that day, Chief Glasgow was due to be examined by our lawyers in discoveries, as I was due to be examined this week.
Okay, so you say examined. To get into more, what type of information would have been brought out?
Answering a series of questions about the details of the case by all of the lawyers involved. It's so important that the questions that Sipekne'katik brought forward to the court be answered. They're essentially, do they have the right to regulate their own fishery and do whatever they want? That is clearly not what the Marshall decision says. It is not in keeping with facts and law. Because of that reason, the UFCA is pressing forward with its own challenge against the Attorney General of Canada and against Sipekne'katik First Nation, essentially seeking to have the same questions that Sipekne'katik has decided they don't want answered in court, answered to provide final clarity on what martial rights mean, and more importantly, what they don't mean, so that we can protect the sustainability of the resource and so that all participants to the fishery can move forward under one set of rules that are understood by everyone.
So do you think this is the end of this, or will this might emerge again, another court challenge?
No, it's certainly not the end of it. Our court case needs to press forward. But I think what the time has come for recognition of facts and reality in this, and that there has been a false narrative put forward that there is no way for Indigenous harvesters to access their rights. And while that may advantage some politicians, the truth is that it's not helping anybody. There's a good news story that deserves to be told about $1 billion worth of fishery access being delivered to Maritime First Nations. And it's become a shining example of economic reconciliation in Canada, to the point that noted academic scholars on Indigenous issues have pointed it out as the best example of economic reconciliation that the Canadian government has ever engaged in. We're at a point now where about 14% of the fishing access in Atlantic Canada is now possessed by the nations.
We're talking lobsters, are we?
Lobster, crab. The largest holder of snow crab quota in Canada is a First Nation in New Brunswick.
Okay.
And so lobster, crab, scallops, elvers,
yeah.
All these different fisheries are to the point where when you look at it as an aggregate, they have 4 to 5 times the amount of fishery access by population distribution as non-Indigenous fishing communities. And the time has come for Indigenous harvesters and for all Maritimers to ask, given that, why can't people access their rights? And it's time for First Nations harvesters to look inward at their own leadership and demand access to the fishing licenses that have been delivered to their nations to fulfill their martial rights through something since 1999 called the Martial Response Initiative.
Okay, so they have these licenses, and you're telling me that band councils are not distributing them?
Not to paint everyone with the same brush, there are the majority of First Nations and First Nations harvesters who are subject to martial rights participate ethically and beneficially in the fishery. We're talking about the outliers, and what they do frequently is lease that access to non-Indigenous vertically integrated fishing companies, effectively dispossessing their own citizens of the access that was delivered to them post-martial to allow fishing.
Okay, so commercial fishermen are taking those leases? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay, so that benefits the commercial fishermen, then does it not?
No, it doesn't. They're almost exclusively leased by vertically integrated fishing corporations who are also violating owner-operator laws that protect individual fishermen. And it certainly isn't beneficial to anybody besides the people that are directly involved in it. It might generate a direct financial benefit back to First Nations governments. But the real value of the Marshall decision, in my view, is not dollars in a bank account or lobsters on the end of a wharf. It's creating a lasting legacy of prosperity by making fishing families within coastal First Nations. And that, to me, is where the direction this should be heading, and not the continued delivery of access to the nations for economic benefit, because each time that happens, it creates a death by 1,000 cuts situation to the coastal communities of the Maritimes who have to rely on fishing. But it all comes down to this question of the authority of the minister. That is what Sabag was alleging, that the minister does not have authority to regulate their fishery. By them withdrawing from this case is a clear admission to us that we brought a strong set of evidence forward, and that the Marshall decision supports our position and not the position of Sabag First Nation.
Well, how would they have known it? Because you didn't get to the point where in which that information would have been out there. Is that correct?
No. In the discovery period, our evidence has been brought forward at that point, and we're getting into questioning the other parties. So it falls back to the point again of why it's so important that these questions be answered. And the question poses is, what was Chief Glasgow so scared to be asked about by our lawyers?
How much money has been invested in this court challenge?
Certainly millions of dollars by the UFCA. And it's a clear indication of how important it was to us and how important it is to the fishing families in the Maritimes that, nearly 4,000 of us have banded together in the UFCA and collected a significant amount of money from our members. It's a matter of survival for us. The sustainability of this resource has to come before anything else. Lobsters do not care who catch them.
Okay, and we've talked about this before when it comes to the resource and sustainability, and academics, and I can't remember which exactly academic it was, but received some attention a couple of years ago by saying that that native fishing does not impact or could not impact the resource. What's your response to that?
My response to that would be that events have proven them dramatically wrong, given that we've seen an out-migration of at least a third of the lobster fishing licenses from St. Mary's Bay, and the closure of one of the largest lobster processing facilities in the province, Riverside Lobster, in St. Mary's Bay area, and its owners cited a lack of product to process as the reason for closing it. We're seeing those diminishing landings around that area. I think the other thing to recognize is that the people who made those claims were social scientists, not fisheries conservation.
Probably never been on a boat in their life.
No, and they're not fisheries conservation biologists, and they're obviously making them for political reasons. Since that time, we've seen a major about face, including Dalhousie University coming to meet with us to apologize for what took place back in 2020. It was clearly wrong. Professors at the university were ordered by the president at the time not to speak out in favor of what we were saying, that these things are unsustainable. Their academic freedom was infringed on, and they were investigated for it at Dalhousie. So we're willing to accept their apology and move forward from here. But clearly those people debased themselves at the time, and facts and events have proven them wrong since then.
Excuse me. Okay, so are you expecting to not see poachers on the waters this season, this summer?
Certainly they have no more justification to be there after withdrawing their claims that they could. We expect to not see them there. I believe that illegal activity would still take place. That's where the minister comes in. Clearly the minister has been liberated by the withdrawal of Sabag challenge to take effective action. And it's not just in St. Mary's Bay. It's also very importantly in St. Peter's Bay, which is under assault. It will be in the fall in Cape Breton. The poaching is just as bad there, and it's spreading to other places in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island, and Quebec. But what I'd like to say is that I believe a new minister and a new government deserve a new chance to set a new course for the department, and I see some strong indications that that is the case. Most obviously, Sipekne'katik's withdrawal seems pretty clear that the government wanted to go back to court with Sipekne'katik as well as we did. Yeah. Also, we've seen some very public enforcement actions in Malpeque Bay and Prince Edward Island over the last couple of weeks against Lennox Island First Nation, who is pursuing a similar strategy to what Chief Sack and Chief Glasgow did for Sipekne'katik First Nation, and we saw some pretty effective enforcement against the elver fishery before the elvers stopped running in Nova Scotia's rivers a couple of weeks ago. So for all those reasons, I believe that we do see a new direction being taken by a new minister, and we're very encouraged by that and look forward to working with her.
What about DFO? And they need to be empowered, right, to do their job?
They do. The minister needs to be empowered by the Prime Minister, by her caucus, to do what's right here, and we're really hopeful and expectant that she will do that. But also the minister needs time to deal with the bureaucracy within DFO, who has facilitated an illegal fishery now for years. Yeah. We know that to be the case. So the minister deserves and needs some time to create an institutional change within DFO that recognizes the supremacy of the rule of law and how important it is for sustainability of fisheries.
Well, there is a sense of urgency here, though. I mean, we can't just take all another season to get this figured out, right?
No, there is a huge sense of urgency. St. Mary's Bay, St. Peter's Bay, they can't stand one more season of destruction.
And intimidation and all that goes with it. I mean, that's the fishermen you guys don't deserve that.
No, nobody deserves to be subject to violence, intimidation, and these things in the fishery. And there's a clear link between the allowance of the illegal fishery and the proliferance of organized crime around it. And where there's huge amounts of money involved, the crime will always follow.
Yeah. Well, Colin, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it, and it seems like it's good news, right? So far, this is a good step for you guys.
It is a step in the right direction. There's a lot more work to be done, but we're ready and willing to sit down at a table with any that wants to move forward.
Okay, great stuff. Colin Sproul, President, Unified Fisheries Conservation Alliance, a group that represents commercial fishers. We'll talk stadium when we come back. All right, a report regarding the possible future of the space will be presented to the Community Planning Committee this morning, or yesterday actually it was done. We're talking with the Wanderers Block on the Halifax Common, the focus of a meeting at Halifax City Hall on Wednesday. Joining me to talk about all this, Howard Epstein of the group Friends of Halifax Common. Howard, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so at issue here is the stadium, and this talk of a stadium continues to come up from time to time, and it's made its way into the news cycle again. $40 million is the ask for a facility for the two soccer teams. What are your main objections here, Howard?
So the Wanderers Block is part of the Halifax Common. It always has been, and it's always been a venue for a whole variety of amateur sports all over the years, whether it's sprinting or baseball or soccer or rugby. But the proposal here, essentially what's happened is Mr. Martin's come along and said, hey, I've got an idea. There's a nice piece of public land sitting there. How about the city helps buy me this land or leases it to me for 30 years? And puts $40 million into it in order to do that. So that's pretty well outright privatization of what's supposed to be public land available for everybody. And that hasn't been the case. So that's the main problem. The other problems, of course, are that the Wanderers Block is home to all kinds of other uses. There's the Lancers, there is the Lawn Bowling Club, there is a small youth center there. The Gardens wants a little bit of that space. The city itself uses some of that to support its landscaping needs around the city. And so there just isn't enough room. As one of the councillors said at the committee yesterday, they're trying to shoehorn an awful lot of uses into a very small piece of space. So we object partly on that grounds and partly on the basis that this essentially would be a privatization of public space. And I offered to the council a parallel. Let them think about this. Okay. Suppose I came along and said, hey, I've got an idea. Why don't you sell me the public gardens or lease it to me for 30 years?
It never happened.
It never happened. It wouldn't happen because the control of that would shift to me as a private individual and away from the city. And I would start saying who could come in and who couldn't and what they'd have to pay and so on. And this is not just a bad financial deal for the city. If it were the public gardens, it's been a bad financial deal for the city already on the Wanderers block. And it would only get worse. We know from studies all over North America that the cost of sports stadiums is just enormous, and it becomes a long-term burden on the taxpayers. Yeah. So we're looking for that not to happen.
Is that a fair apples-to-apples comparison, though, the public garden and the Wanderers ground? I mean, the public garden is a jewel in the city, which everybody knows, and the Wanderers ground is a kind of a sports field that not a lot of people go to other than for soccer.
Sure, use sports. No one's against sports, and certainly no one's against amateur sports. No one's even against professional sports. The issue is the location. And what we're saying is that if Mr. Martin and his for-profit soccer teams want to have a location, they should go and buy one somewhere. I mean, there are lots of locations that are probably, in fact, better locations on the outskirts of the city.
Not according to them, obviously. They claim that this is the ideal location because it's on the peninsula, where there's a lot of people, younger people, and they love that location.
I've been, I think, fairly closely also in touch with public opinion, and I think public opinion is really not in favor of this so strongly as Mr. Martin suggests, or in fact at all. You've got to start thinking about things whether what we want is a big stadium in the middle of the city that will attract more car traffic. City seems to have policies against that, but they don't really seem to follow through. If we want a stadium, is it just going to be for sports? Is it going to be for other things? There has to be some flexibility built into it. That's a whole other discussion entirely apart from the location of this. And there's no real benefit to anybody, particularly apart from the owners of the soccer team to have this facility right there. It's convenient for them, but it's especially convenient only if the city puts in Mr. Martin's words, $40 million and gives it to him for 30 years with control over what goes on there.
Now, you mentioned car traffic. It's not an issue right now, and they're selling out regularly, 600 people there, and there doesn't seem to be an issue with traffic.
Yes, he wants to increase the size, of
course, about 85, 75 or 8,500, but apparently, seemingly right now, traffic does not seem to be an issue.
Well, it actually is an issue. You find cars parked in the cemetery across the way, clogging up the streets. This is a real problem.
Okay. All right. So fundamentally, the fact that it's public property, is that sacrosanct? Is that part of it?
Well, and also, I'm as a taxpayer, I got to say, I'm not keen on subsidizing what's a private business to that extent by any means. I mean, this is if it's a private business that's a profit basis, they should be paying their way themselves, not asking the city to make any kind of financial contribution. And if it is going to be a financial contribution, it has to be a lot less with control ultimately in the hands of the city. And so far, the only public statement we've seen from Mr. Martin's group is the one in which he asked the city to put in $40 million. And one of the things that was in the report yesterday is that that their estimates of what it's going to cost for building a stadium, even of the size that Mr. Martin is talking about, it will range from $116 to about $125 million. And I don't hear Mr. Martin rushing to say that he's happy to pony up that amount of money. If you took even the $40 million that he was saying that he wanted the city to put in, really it should operate something like that on a full cost recovery basis for the city, for the benefit of the taxpayers. Full cost recovery of $40 million over 30 years would mean Mr. Martin would be paying rent of about $100,000 a month. And I don't hear him saying that.
What's he paying now? Do we know?
Oh, yeah. He pays about $3,000 every time there's a game.
That's it.
Sorry?
That's it? $3,000 a game?
Yeah.
Wow. And look, what about this pop-up stadium? It appears to be permanent at this point because it's been a pop-up stadium for years now.
Yeah, what's happened is by stealth, the city has just from year to year put a little money into fixing up the Wanderers grounds. I'm glad they did. But essentially what they're trying to make it look like is without any kind of extensive public consultation or thinking through what it is that the city needs in terms of stadium for sports or performance. They're trying to make it look like an accomplished fact. It isn't. What they've got now is a stadium that can support a variety of sports and sometimes some other kinds of performances, but it doesn't lock us into doing a deal with Mr. Martin by any means.
Yeah, the idea that it could be multi-purpose, you don't buy that.
So here's the problem: is that we've heard Mr. Martin go hot and cold as to whether he wants grass or he wants turf, and depending on what you've got there, it's going to limit the kind of sports that you can actually play on that. It's not so clear that you're going to be able to play anything except soccer. Are rugby players going to be doing that? Are football players going to be doing that and chewing up the grass or the turf? Yeah. And he's switched back and forth from saying he wants the one to the other, and it's not clear. What we need is flexibility.
And in concerts, do you really want a bunch of concert goers stomping around on the turf? Right?
Well, it's not just that. That's of course big damage. We saw when there were big concerts, like when the Rolling Stones came and they were on the North Common. It took several years to kind of put it back in shape so that people could go back to playing softball. That is a real problem.
Okay, Howard, interesting. Thanks for coming in, and we'll talk again.
Pleasure to see you.
Okay, take care. Howard Epstein of the group Friends of Halifax Common. Interesting stuff. Again, something that perhaps you might want to weigh in on when we open the phone lines in about half an hour's time. Without better protection, residents warn Nova Scotia coastline risks death by 1,000 cuts. That when we come back. I saw the story on the CBC website. The headline, without better protection, residents warn Nova Scotia coastline risks death by 1,000 cuts. Infill projects often regulated by provincial rules where municipalities have no power. Joining me to discuss this is Jessica Bradford, Special Projects Manager with the Ocean Tracking Network at Dalhousie University. Jessica, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me. I'd just like to note, I'm not sure how my work title got into there, but I'm actually speaking as a resident and no advocacy on behalf of my position with my work. This isn't related to my title. So I just wanted to add that disclaimer in there.
Okay, fair enough. I apologize for that.
No, that's no worries at all.
Okay, all right. So I guess kind of review what you talked about in the story, if you will, to start. Kind of encapsulate what the story or summarize what the story got into here.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. So I am a resident in the region of Queens Municipality. And while I was driving a popular shore road loop in the area, I noticed an area had been cleared of natural vegetation, and there was an excavator at work and adding some fill to the area. And this particular area, I should also note, is a place that is directly fronts the Atlantic Ocean, a very high wave energy area, known for its surf. When there's big storms, people go there to watch because it is a place where the power of the ocean is quite impressive and often does actually flood, I would say at least once a year during those big storms and storm surge. And so when going by, my first thought is, well, that's not going to last very long. So I kind of at first left it at that, and then I kind of sat with that thought a little bit more. And I realized this is actually quite problematic, and it is a narrow strip of land that was cleared, but it would have been quite an old stand of spruce that would have been cleared and then infilled. And so that stand of spruce was serving a purpose and providing ecosystem services to help buffer and protect against storm surge and protect that area of the road. And so I did reach out to the municipality to seek a little bit more information about what was going on and how something like this was allowed to happen.
And what was the response?
So their response was basically that they were unaware that it was happening. They hadn't received any information about building permits that were requested for this strip of land, and I was told that their bylaws don't actually, unless there's plans for a building or a structure on a site, then their current municipal bylaws can't do anything to regulate infilling like this, excavation infilling work along the coast.
All right, so I'm assuming that this would be a similar story all around the province. The municipalities would probably echo those same comments. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. So in doing this digging, that's something that has emerged because, as we all know, last year the Coastal Protection Act was scrapped by the provincial government, and in place of that there was something called, I think, the Coastline Plan, which was put into place. So something that definitely wasn't as a cohesive or integrated plan or approach, is quite short-sighted. And another point of that was basically, for lack of a better term, passing the buck to municipalities to oversee coastal protection. And so this particular case highlights a significant regulatory gap, whereas the municipalities they can do nothing. Although they're now expected to be responsible for coastal protection, they can do nothing to regulate against these kind of excavation and infilling projects. And in this particular area is very problematic. And I think although it's a very narrow, small strip of land, it really highlights the issue because we have this strip of private property that's directly between a well-traveled public road and the coastal common, so a beach and the ocean. And so the Coastal Protection Act would have helped regulate this kind of activity in what would have been considered a coastal protection zone. But in this case, where we don't have something province-wide and integrated, this kind of project can fall through the cracks.
Okay, is there I'm sure there's lots of speculation as to why the province dropped the Coastal Protection Act, considering that it was passed unanimously.
Yeah.
But so what's the speculation as to what's going on? Why was this suddenly dropped?
Oh gosh, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, my first instinct, I want to follow the money trail. I'd like to know where developer lobbying groups kind of come into play with this. Yeah, it's a major question I think a lot of people have in the back of their minds is, how is this, if it was passed unanimously, we were so close. It was just kind of last step was getting those regulations in place, and then it was dropped suddenly. I think your guess is as good as mine, and it's really unfortunate because we're seeing these cases popping up in different areas of the province. In my neck of the woods, on the South Shore in particular, there's well-publicized cases like the inappropriate development in basically a sand dune on Eaglehead Beach by former Mayor Peter Kelly. And then there's also the case of Little Crescent Beach, which is just an ongoing issue, an absolute mess in the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. And so those are just two well-publicized cases I know on the South Shore. Mm-hmm. And, this one in particular that I'm talking about and the infilling in Scotts Bay, it's particularly concerning because this is a very well-traveled public road, and this is allowed to happen, in plain sight. So it's like, what is going on in more remote areas of the province?
So the Coastal Protection Act would have not allowed this type of activity. Is that safe to say?
That's safe to say, yeah. So currently, the province can regulate between at the high tide line and below that. However, this particular piece of property it is above the high tide line. Again, it's sandwiched in between the high tide line and public infrastructure. But in the case that the Coastal Protection Act would have been implemented, it would have factored in a coastal protection zone that would have allowed for regulation above the high tide line as well.
Okay, so municipalities were given the authority to enact their own bylaws on pertaining to this. How many have? Do you know?
I'm most familiar with what's going on in the municipality of the District of Lunenburg and then Region of Queens municipality.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's happening in other areas of the province, but they have been working on implementing some of these bylaws which allow for the Region of Queens and I believe Lunenburg as well. There's a setback limit for building development 30 meters above the high tide line or the top of a bank. So there is that in place, but again, that only factors into development where there's a structure intended to be built. However, these infilling, these kind of clearing the natural vegetation and these type of infilling projects are not covered under that currently, which in this case is definitely troublesome because you've just sped up coastal erosion by, let's say, I'm just throwing numbers out there, but you've sped up coastal erosion in this particular site by, let's say, 10 to 20 years, and there's a public road that already is vulnerable to storm surge and flooding. So, it leaves kind of these questions in the back of my mind, like, and what I'll be watching for is, will this have greater impacts? Will the flooding worsen here in this particular area where that buffer zone has been removed, and now you've just put a bunch of fill there that will inevitably get swept back into the ocean, and then that can have impacts too on fish habitat or, some of the larger fill maybe getting deposited and impacting some of the surf breaks in the area. So there's those kind of questions that, again, it just really leaves me wondering how this kind of thing was allowed to happen.
Okay, so mapping tools and information so property owners can make informed decisions about protecting their land and buildings from sea level rise. Are they effective or no?
From what I'm seeing, maybe there are some responsible property owners that are doing socially and environmentally responsible developments, but I'm currently not seeing that across the table. So I don't think people are making quote unquote informed decisions. That was the intent of the province providing these tools to coastal property owners. But I'm not seeing that yet.
Okay, Jessica, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. And it's been an interesting chat. Thanks for doing this.
Okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate you shedding some light on this and keeping the conversation going on it.
All right, take care. Jessica Bradford, concerned citizen about all of this, and an interesting chat for sure. The Mayor, Andy Fillmore, when we come back. All right, joining me for a chat is the Mayor of HRM, Andy Fillmore. Mr. Mayor, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course.
A pleasure, Todd, as always.
All right. So last time we were chatting, you were talking about this motion to pause bike lane construction, and to no avail. It was not a success. What are your thoughts on it so far?
Yeah, well, the vote failed 12-5, and so I'm very grateful for the councillors who joined me in trying to do better for our city. We have this terrible congestion problem that you and I talked about, and we took a crack at trying to make it better, and council wasn't in the mood to do that. So the good news is that I was able to, once that motion failed, once I lost that vote, I quickly put another alternate motion on the table that I at least was able to stop for now until it's redesigned, turning Morris Street into a one-way street, which would have dire congestion implications. So we got a small win out of it, Todd, but unfortunately we didn't carry the day.
Okay, some suggest that perhaps you conflated the issues of congestion with cost, and if you would have focused on cost, that might have been more effective. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, when the project does quadruple in cost, And by the way, when it goes up 4 times in cost, the share paid for by the province and the federal government didn't change. It was only the HRM share that, HRM has to cover the inflation there. And that comes out to 1,000%. This is a 1,000% increase in cost for this project that municipal taxpayers are on the hook for. The thing is, if you focus on just the money, you're not getting the design changes to the intersection. So what I was really trying to stop was the closing down of lanes where traffic flows, where buses drive, where trucks and vans drive, where people in their cars drive. We're closing those down for bike lanes in many cases, and those are the ones I wanted to stop. So focusing on just the money wouldn't have achieved that. I needed to go down both roads.
Okay, some members of council kind of felt that this came out of nowhere and didn't really have much time to digest it. Was it a little hasty?
No, we have a process for bringing motions to the council, and I followed it. So it was strictly by the letter of the process. So I think if people are saying they're surprised, I believe what they're likely reacting to is an unfamiliarity with a mayor who brings motions for change like this. So I think this is a new phenomenon at City Hall. People are taking some time to get used to it, and so I guess what they're surprised at is that the mayor is bringing motions. And that's how I would explain that.
Okay, here's a quote from Sam Austin. You've heard all of this. I'm sure he called the motion a red herring, saying, "This isn't good governance. This is foolish. This motion is so ill-advised." He says there's no connection between congestion and bike lanes. It's not true. I'm profoundly disappointed in this motion for a lot of reasons. Bike lanes do not cause congestions. You can talk to anybody in the urban planning role, and they will tell you that. Water is wet. The sky is blue. The sun rises in the east. Bike lanes do not cause congestion. What are your thoughts on that kind of flippant response?
Yeah, well, Sam and I disagree, of course. Todd, I've been a city planner for 30 years. I was the director of the Dalhousie School of Planning. I've taught many planners how to be planners. And I'll tell you, the planning textbook does say that bike lanes don't cause congestion, but there's a huge but. And the but is they don't cause congestion, but you have to build the alternatives to people being in their cars. You can't just take away lane capacity without providing a bus network that works, without creating the bus rapid transit system, without giving people rural transit options. There are many people in our city who either because of their geography, like where they live and where they work, or because they're not able physically, bikes aren't an option. So we're serving a very small portion of the population with these investments, and we're doing it in a way that is keeping the rest of the population from having their needs met. And so I will go to bat every time for the residents of HRM. I'm listening to residents. I'm reflecting what the majority of residents are telling me, and I took that into the council chamber. And it's disappointing that I couldn't get enough councillors to agree that when we're contributing to congestion, when we're 4 times the cost, 1,000 times the cost, 1,000% more cost for HRM taxpayers, that we can't have a sober second thought. We can't just pause for a minute to check in with ourselves that we're doing the right thing. I mean, it's a very odd situation.
What about the argument that by delaying it, it's just going to cost more because every year that you delay it, its costs are going to go up exponentially? What's your response to that?
There can be an incremental cost for delay. However, in speaking with HRM staff who are on these files, in many cases, the redesigns, when we take the bike lanes off of the main traffic corridors and move them into the quieter side streets, are actually much less expensive to build. So, I live on a AAA bikeway myself, but it's handled paint and signage. It's not because it's on a secondary road. It doesn't require all the concrete and shifting of curb lines and all that these expensive ones do on the main streets. So the redesigns actually would have cost less. We would have had more money to move the bike network out. We could have used more money to help get the bus rapid transit, rural transit going. So I don't buy that it would have cost more.
All right. How's the tendering? How many companies are bidding on this? Do we know?
Oh boy, Todd, that's right into the weeds. It's knowable, but I don't know myself.
But I guess what I'm driving at is perhaps we need to look at the tendering process. We are not to suggest that the federal government is some reflection on your government. The recent AG report, you've heard it, I'm sure, a scathing report about procurement in general and at the federal level. maybe perhaps we need to look at our procurement and sharpen our pencil here in HRM. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I agree, and I talked a lot about that during my election campaign. Is what the way we build roads, the way we care for road work like this, and like for repaving. The way we set up our system now, the system I inherited, is that we have to wait until the municipal budget is approved. That didn't until April or even May this year, and so you can't even let the tenders until that happens. Meanwhile, all the people that do the road work are already all booked up. And so you're like, what you want to do is release those tenders in January, February, when people are looking for work and you're getting better prices. But to the party with our tenders, so we're getting jacked up prices. The other thing is, extending the work season, extending it in the spring or in the fall. And importantly, allowing work to happen at night so it's not contributing to congestion. So these are all things that touch on the procurement issues, as you've said.
How about users and how much usage this is getting? Do you think it's inflated, or how do we get accurate information as to how much usage is actually happening right now when it comes to these networks?
Yeah, some of the numbers that were offered up for rates of usage were based on resident surveys. Some of those surveys, had in one case, in a survey that was provided that said, 50 to 55% of people want more investments in bike lanes. 100 people responded to that survey. I'm sure that they were bike lane users. That's not statistically useful. So we would really need to go into a proper kind of polling situation to figure it out. I do note that Statistics Canada's most recent infant for bike lane usage, or people who commute by bike in HRM, is from 2021, and it's less than 1% of the population. It was like 0.7% of people that live in HRM go to work on their bicycle. So it really is a subset of people. You have to be close to where you're getting to. You have to be physically able, and you have to not be afraid, I guess. So those are the criteria that you have to meet to be a bike rider.
So what's next before we run out of time? Is this a dead issue, or are you going to continue to try and battle it?
I'm going to continue to try to battle congestion in any way I can. There are some other things I want to look at: the smart signals, how we can improve the signalization, so that the lights are talking to each other, so that we can have cars moving more smoothly through the city. I'm hearing an awful lot of concern about right turn on red signs that are proliferating across the municipality. I haven't seen any evidence that it is solving any. I'm not sure what the problem is it's solving. I don't see any evidence that pedestrians are safer. But anyway, those are things I want to look at, and I'm just going to keep on listening to residents and keep on working with my council colleagues to try to do better. That's the most I can do.
Okay, Mayor Fillmore, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, take care. Andy Fillmore, Mayor of HRM. All right, what is on your mind? Perhaps you might want to respond to what you just heard, or whatever else you've got on your mind. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. So to reach us, 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today? Again, 902-405-6000. Perhaps some of you might want to respond to what you just heard with Mayor Andy Fillmore of HRM defending his stance about bike lanes and the fact that there's a need for a pause, and says as a planner, as a city planner, somebody who taught city planning, he knows a thing or two about this, and states and stands by his claim that under the current design, that bike lanes are causing congestion, and to his point, their cost has gone up exponentially from $25 million to $100 million, and that extra cost has to be absorbed entirely by the municipality, because the federal portion only covered the initial $25 million purchase. So what are your thoughts on this, folks? The motion only garnered support from 4 other councillors, of course. One of those councillors is Trish Purdy, who will be on the show on Monday during Councillors on the Hot Seat, by the way, so it'll be interesting to get her take on all of this. Well, what are your thoughts on what the mayor said? He said that he's not going to let this go, that he is going to continue to fight for what he thinks is a just cause, and that is pressing pause on bike lanes. And again, if regardless of what side you fall in on this, folks, I want to hear from you. Give us a call. We heard from a few people yesterday. Not many, but a few who felt as though that it was not the right move and believe the council did get it right. I'm of the belief that there are members of council, it wouldn't matter what the cost or what information you put in front of them, they would still want bike lanes and want this to go ahead. Just hell-bent on ideology. I firmly believe that. But what's your take on this? 902-405-6000. Also, Stadium Talk is back again. A new plan considers what a permanent soccer stadium could look like in downtown Halifax, but says using the same location at the current pop-up facility would bring compromises for the stadium and other nearby groups. Municipal staff presented a functional plan for the Wanderers block to the city's Community Planning and Economic Development Committee yesterday. The area is mostly municipal land and part of the Halifax Common. The plan considered what it would look like to accommodate all the requests from current and possible future tenants of the area, including 2 professional soccer teams, a horse riding school, lawn bowling club, and municipal park staff. The Halifax Wanderers professional soccer team and the new Halifax Tides women's team want a permanent 8,500-seat stadium with running water, locker rooms, and concession areas that could expand seating in the future. They suggested a turf field that would allow amateur and school teams to play year-round, could handle concerts with 13,000-person standing capacity. The price tag, $40 million. And look, folks, you know that $40 million would be probably double that. Who knows what the end cost would be. And earlier in the show, I chatted with Howard Epstein with the Friends of Halifax Common, who represents that group, who vehemently oppose this, who say that sports stadiums are notoriously unproductive when it comes to generating revenue and paying for themselves, and feels as though this is definitely the wrong location, and says, look, if they want a soccer stadium, find a parcel of land, private land, and build a stadium. Do you agree or disagree with Howard on this? Or do you think that it would be a good investment, a worthy investment, something that would benefit the peninsula and Halifax in general? That or whatever else you've got in your mind, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Krista. Hello, Krista.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Awesome. So in a follow-up to the biking discussion, as a biker myself, I refuse to ride my road bike almost pretty much anywhere in HRM because the shoulders of the roads are so dangerous. But Mr. Fillmore should be really looking at biker awareness in Nova Scotia, because a lot of people, well, now that the roads have like insane amount of traffic on them, a lot of people want to ride their bikes, but it's absolutely dangerous. People drive by, they don't have the awareness of how much space they're supposed to give between a biker and the side of the road. If you can't, people will drive by and will be a foot away from you, you know, going more than the speed limit.
Yeah.
And it's scary. So definitely people would ride their bikes. And another thing, like, I remember being downtown Halifax, and all of a sudden I'm going down Barrington Street, and was it Barrington or anyway, somewhere down by the casino, and all of a sudden there was just no bike lane. Mm-hmm. And I was thrown onto like basically a ramp. I almost had a heart attack. I'm like, this place is dire hard scary to be on a bicycle in. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps putting money into biker awareness so that the bikers learn about what their rights are and how to use the road properly with a bike. And putting more campaigns on the radio stations about like, hey, make sure you stay 1 meter away, you slow down, or the police can give you a fine.
Well, Chris, let me push back a little bit, and I hear what you're saying completely, but there are times when the bike has a responsibility as well. And let me finish now. There are times when in order to accommodate that 1 meter, that means that me as a driver would have to go over the middle line, right? Because there are times when bikes are over too far, And in fairness, I don't blame you because, like you said, the conditions are crappy on the shoulder of the road. So I'm not blaming anybody, but circumstances, it works both ways here, right? That I think what you're getting at is that it's dangerous no matter what, and I don't think we can just blame motorists for the conditions.
Oh, so you missed what I said, because I said there should be more information out there for people that do want to ride their bike, that they learn what the road rules are, because not everybody actually has a driver's license that are on their bicycles.
Okay.
You know? So yeah, it's biker awareness. Like more awareness campaigns about it can actually work. But like, you know, if you're going down Quimple Road, for example, and you're on your bike, okay, I see use the side street safer, but all it takes is one person to open up their door, you know, and you're dead.
Yeah.
So a lot of bikers don't even think about these things, right?
That's true. So you don't you don't drive your bike, or you do in the city, Krista?
So I will ride my mountain bike.
Yeah.
I will. And sometimes, like, for example, I lived in the North End for a while, and if I was going down to, like, Good Life Fitness to work out on Joseph Howe, and I had to go down Lady Hammond to get there, I'd actually just go on the sidewalk. I'm like, I'm not going to jeopardize my life.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
You know? So, I mean, people try to make it work, but unless you're an experienced biker, it can be, and even if you're not, like, it was scary learning how to bike in the city.
Yeah.
And,
okay, Krista, I appreciate your comments. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Good program.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Ralph, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, you?
Just hunky-dory. My first question, how many of the councillors actually ride on the bike lane?
I can't answer that. I can't answer that question.
No. That's just an open
hypothetical question. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that So, Ralph, let me interpret what you're suggesting, that they're walking the walk, or they're not. They're talking the talk, but not walking the walk. Is that what you're saying?
Spot on.
Okay.
And I think the mayor is spot on with what he's doing. It is our money, not the councillor's money or the mayor's money, that's paying for all this. The bikers do not pay anything to register their bikes, to use the roads. I mean, I'm a bike rider. We used to have the bikes licensed here. It wasn't much money, and it didn't pay for a whole lot. But it's 1% of the population being funded by the whole works. It's not fair to the taxpayer. And if somebody has a better idea, as the mayor has, take them off the main roads. They're choking the city up with bike lanes and cafes and everything else. It is a major seaport. It is the lifeblood of the country, yet they're putting high-end condos down on Lower Water Street, Hollis Street, and choking off the traffic for the trucks. That's the only way you can get it in right now. They're down to one lane. They don't even, there's places where it's supposed to be two lanes during peak hours. It's not enforced, and you still have areas that don't allow it to go through. We take parts of the road away for construction sites. Force them to work within the property lines, and not choke off main roads.
How about rail, Ralph?
It's our money.
How about getting rail down into the ports, more rail capacity? What are your thoughts on that, for an idea?
I think it's great, but where are you going to run it? The people where the rail is complain constantly about the noise.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless you widen that, or the cost is so prohibitive. It is a seaport. This is the lifeblood of the country.
Yeah.
Why do we want to stop this? It makes no sense. The rich just don't want it there. Do you remember Osborne Head? Gunnery range?
Sure do, yeah.
Yeah. That was part of the military.
Yeah.
Then rich people moved in and built fancy houses and started complaining about the noise. So government was forced to shut down the gunnery range, which is, goes along with all the other military stuff that they're trying to cut out.
Okay, Ralph. Anyways, I appreciate your call. Piece. Thanks for the call.
And I think the mayor is spot on.
Okay, pal. Thanks for the call. Take care.
Okay.
902-405-6000. Get in on the conversation, folks. 902-405-6000. We will be back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Let's go back to the phone. Talk to Ed. Hello, Ed.
Hey, how you doing there?
I'm well, you?
Good. When you talk to the mayor about the bike lanes and his fight against them there, I think you misconstrued something there, because when you asked him, are you going to continue fighting for them and stuff there, he kind of paused, and then he went on. He said he's always going to fight against congestion in the city. No mention of the fighting against the bike lanes. I mean, that many councillors against him, I think it's pretty much dead unless he can sweet talk 3 or 4 more. But other than that, things that do congestion. I drive the transit bus, Roby Street, make it no parking during rush hours, so buses can get in and along both ways. Clear people out of the bus lanes downtown, so we can get from Nora Bernard down to the terminals without having to have like 500 cars in front of us that are all lined up because they wanted to be first. Things like that can help improve the transit. The Windsor Street Exchange said it 3 years ago, say it again. There's a spot where the buses come in from Bedford there at the first overpass and come down the hill from Main Street and turn on to the Exchange there. There's a little cutout. Make that a buses only instead of a suicide lane for us to get into and then try to fight our way into traffic. And we could shave 2 or 3 minutes off each bus trip just by going through that, because they have the yield signs coming off Joe Howe Drive there. So it'd be pretty easy to get all the buses, the 8s, the 90s, the 4s, and everything all through there. Save a lot of time and congestion downtown just by doing those things there. No parking on the major streets, enforce the bus lanes. And, the bike lanes are a pain in the butt, especially when they have the corners, when they have the concrete barrier at the corner, like at the bottom of South Park there on Inglis, because I've got to turn a bus, 40 or 60-foot bus with about 7 feet on each to go around a car that's already at the stop sign. So little things like that, get rid of those barriers if you're going to have bike lanes, at least on the corners. But other than that, I think he's pretty much fighting a losing battle on that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think the public sentiment is what it is, Ed? Why do you think that these councillors are hell-bent on this?
I don't know, just make work projects, and it's not even make work for the city anymore, city employees. It's all the constructions there. Like, I heard about someone who convinced Halifax to go with other companies to do snowplow removal and stuff there. And they did that, and then they sold all the trucks and stuff at a discount to them. And then they ended up paying a lot more than they would have paid if they kept it in-house. So who knows? Maybe someone had a cousin who owns a bike shop. Who knows? But, some of them, they just want to be green, no matter what. Save the environment. But, you can do that. But like the mayor says, put it on the secondary streets, like coming down Cogley, put on Jubilee instead of, Quinpool there. Or, if you're going down the Roby Street, if you got rid of the parking during rush hours, you'd have room to put in a bike lane on each side. That'd be pretty darn safe. But other than that, there's not much that they can do other than redesign, and they should have some redesign there is needed. That Kennard Street intersection there, the one I'm talking about.
Yep.
They should have just.
Yeah, that's a disaster. That's the worst intersection I've ever seen in my entire life. It really
is. When I got to turn left to go to Kennard there, nobody can get by me that's going straight, so it's all backing up behind me.
Ed, I can't believe there aren't more accidents at that intersection. Honest to God, I've driven in a lot of cities. I've never ever seen anything like that. I still don't know. I still don't have a clue how to navigate that intersection.
Exactly, things like that. No left turns on some of the main streets, like Spring Garden Road. Mm-hmm. I set 2 or 3 lights waiting for people to turn right or turn left to go up the side streets there in both directions, or give the pedestrians their own signal. All lights are red. Pedestrians can walk either way for 30, 40 seconds, and then straight, and then your side streets, and off you go.
Yeah,
little things like that. I mean, they're tiny pinpricks in it, but you put enough pinpricks in a bucket, you'll run out of water.
Well, I mean, you talk to somebody like yourself who navigates the streets every day and deals with this. You'd be a wealth of information and are so. But unfortunately, I don't think that they're listening to you.
No, they don't. I've brought the Windsor Street Exchange thing to councillors a few years ago. Like I said, I've called your show, and they said, "Oh, we're going to be redoing it." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're not redoing that for 2 or 3 more years." So in the meantime, it takes $60 worth of paint and an hour of some guy's time to paint that into a bus lane. But they want big solutions, so maybe they can look like they're doing a grand job. Who knows?
Okay, I appreciate the call, pal. Take care.
Yeah, have a good day.
All right, makes a lot of sense, doesn't he? In my opinion. 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
How you doing, Todd?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad, thanks.
Great.
Thought I'd jump on the mayor's comments there on the radio.
Sure.
I'm in support of what he's doing. I can also say that as a former mayor candidate, as you well know, in the last election, high on the agenda, and I banged on doors from Ecom Seacom right up to here at the city, and I can tell you that there were 3 things that were on everybody's mind at that time, and one was transit, of course, one was homelessness, and one was fiscal responsibility. And the mayor had all 3 in his platform, and during our debates, those were the main issues as well. So I think he has the courage to come out and give motions before council, which is refreshing because the last mayor, Savage, did not routinely do that and didn't put his foot forward that much. And I think what I saw in that debate was what I call groupthink. Groupthink, of course, meaning that there are several councillors here that have been there for a while that are able to basically build their ideology into the new candidates that aren't used to that type of debate. And it was quite clear that some of the older candidates' minds were already made up before they even entered the debate with the mayor. Comments like the mayor's foolish and what have you was unacceptable. Sean Cleary, I'll mention him specifically. He's an avid bike rider, but you can play the tape back on your show because I know that he once said he would not ride his bicycle through the Windsor interchange until they change it, but he routinely will ride it on the sidewalk to avoid that. So he's willing to put pedestrians in danger on his bike. So a bit of a hypocritical comment there. But I think the overall purpose of what the mayor is saying, and the way I read it, is he's trying to address the changes within Halifax with our narrow streets. Born and raised here, policed it, as you know. And we still have our narrow streets, but they're getting even more narrower. And we have to find a way to not push this anti-car or anti-bike argument at all. It all has to do with being able to meet the needs of everybody, but in particular the fiscal needs. I mean, geez, you can't ignore the fact that it's quadrupled in price. And what has to be addressed is why has that happened? And that was not answered at the debate. And all the mayor wants to see is, well, show me where the costs are increased and why, and let's look at it more strategically. Even in my campaign, I got good reception, and not some good reception because I wanted a moratorium on bike lanes, and there's a reason for that. So I think that the mayor is headed in the right direction. We don't want to see this anti-bike. The bikers that use bikes, I used to use my bike when I was young. The bikers know the rules of the road because they know they have to stop at a red light. They know they have to yield. They know they have to stop at a stop sign. They know they have to walk their bike across a crosswalk and not ride it. So they are subject to those rules, and it's their responsibility to adhere to them. But my last comment will be directed toward the electric bikes. I was out here walking one day and just strolling along. You know how when you walk, you might sway to your right or sway to your left, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, right beside me came some of these electric bikes and scooters on the sidewalk. So they have to get to the provincial government and say, look, if we're going to have electric bikes that can go up as high as 30 miles per hour, they need to be licensed. They need to be insured. They could do a lot of damage to a human being, let alone a car. So there's all kinds of things that have to be addressed, and I think the mayor is prudent in not giving up on his quest to try to get some fiscal responsibility, because it's quite clear that some of the councillors that voted against this have no sense of fiscal responsibility.
Hey, Jim, appreciate your comments as always. Thanks, bud.
Take care.
All right, 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz. What is on your mind today? 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. Before I go back to the phones, though, I want to read a quick email from Don. Don says, I wish you could ask your listeners to be honest and say how much driving they do that really does need to be done. Does going to Costco 3 times a week really is going to Costco 3 times a week really need it? Why not better planning? Why not walk from English Street to Spring Garden? Do people have to drive all the time when a good walk is available? I know some people must drive, but many people are just not interested in being responsible. It's hard for me to be too sympathetic to the average driver. Comes from Don. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Joshua, hello.
Hi.
Hi there.
I agree with the mayor on the bike issue. I get the bikes and everything, but when I'm driving around the city every day, I see bicyclists like basically using the bike lanes, and at their thought they can go on the sidewalk and go across the crosswalks, don't dismount. It's like free for all for most of them. I see they aren't wearing helmets, so it's hard to enforce. I agree with them being licensed and maybe having proper signals on them if they're like lights or something like that if they're on the roads. Because just like our roads are they're made for vehicles, and downtown core is so narrow. Putting bike lanes anywhere in the downtown core will congest traffic. I agree with the mayor. There's no doubt. If you congest Bell Road there when they put those barricades up, you can't turn right and everything like that. And I mean, we have a population boom, big time the last 2 years. So we got more cars on the road. You can't do your job or commute to your job mostly because our transit system needs improvement. So most people have cars to drive around the city, and there's more people here.
Okay, Josh, but the argument is out there that if you built the bike network and more people use the bikes, then that would eventually reduce vehicle traffic congestion, and you don't believe that theory?
No, because like you said yesterday, who's going to be using their bike past late November to April?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't. Yeah,
and then you have people with disabilities and whatnot, and that can't use bikes. I mean, I don't know what the rules are for the sidewalks, but you get those scooters going around everywhere, and those electric bikes. Those were an issue, but I mean, if it's that much of a problem downtown, maybe have training for like the guy that called there said the bikes used to be licensed and stuff. It's definitely the last call about insurance. I mean, if you get into a vehicular/bike collision, I mean, what's the law there? But I mean, if they could use a sidewalk and appropriately share it with the pedestrians, just like similar to parks, that might be a result. But to make bike lanes in the core of the city and move, like, you have to move buildings literally. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, fiscal responsibility. We got higher priorities right now with all kinds of things. I get people want to use bikes and be green, but yet you got to come back to the common sense factor of how much is that going to cost and what kind of logistics do we have as a city, how it's built. You can't move buildings. And my point of view too is if you put bike lanes in already narrow streets, you're going to have more accidents. You're going to have people getting hurt. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think the fiscal responsibility thing and the traffic congestion, I mean, I would ask council, do you want to raise everyone's taxes? I mean, everyone's hard up for money right now as it is. Last year and a half, they're already tapped out, like you said in your shows prior. I mean, do you want taxes to go up? Does the bicyclists want taxes to go up? I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? We got to all think about that. We got to have a common sense approach to everything.
Okay, Josh, appreciate your comments. Thanks for the call.
No problem. Take care.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Brian, hello.
Hey, Todd. So your last caller mentioned the idea of a population boom in the last 2 years and then alluded to the cost of these bike lanes. And he's right, we've had a population boom. But if everyone coming here doesn't have viable options other than cars, if everyone has to drive their cars, what is the cost of that? The cars are much harder on the roadway. You know, every project of for our roads, that they go over budget, sometimes by tens of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So if we bring people in and say, well, sorry, the only option is cars, they're all going to drive, and the cost is going to be just as high, if not even higher than that. Plus, talk about traffic, a population boom. Why do you think we're having the increased congestion? It's not due to bike lanes. We have more people who they don't have. The transit we know is a bit of a mess right now. Yeah. So giving people other options other than sitting in their cars is going to do nothing but help traffic. And I wanted to say, Todd, as well, when the mayor was on, I appreciate him being concerned about the financial aspect of it. Of course I do. But he's coming with figures that are inaccurate. He's misinforming. And listening to your show, I guess I'm just wishing for a little bit of pushback from you. You're the moderator, and I think you're trying to stay neutral as much as you can. But, he's saying that it's 4 times the cost now. It's ballooned to 4 times the cost. And then he says, oh, actually, that's 1,000%. 4 times does not equal 1,000%.
He corrected himself, Brian, when he said that. Yeah.
I heard him say it.
He corrected himself. He totally did.
All right, well,
yeah.
Okay, well, I hope you did, because I heard it too much. I didn't hear a correction. I didn't hear pushback.
Wait a minute. You say pushback. Like I said, he said clearly $100 million. He said 4 times. He said 1,000%. It was a slip of the tongue, and he corrected himself. So where's the pushback needed?
Like I said, I heard him say 1,000% 2 different times in the interview without a correction. I'll go back and re-listen. I could be wrong, and hopefully I am, and that's great if he did that. Either way, he's quoted everywhere as not having proper stats. So he made that slip up.
Okay, where else are the improper stats, Brian? I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want you to clarity on that.
Well, he mentioned when he was mentioning the number of people in the survey who said that they were in favor of other active transportation such as bike lanes. Mm-hmm. He quoted it like 55, and I believe it was 64. But again, he doesn't know. And for someone bringing this information, bringing these motions, I would hope and expect that he might actually have the stats. And CBC even quoted in the story 2 days ago, CBC said he hasn't delivered any actual statistics, any actual data. It's all based around anecdotal evidence. And I feel like something like this, if he has data to show that it's causing congestion, great. Let's see it. But there isn't any. And I guess for the cost overrun, again, yes, the costs are overrun, and it is shocking. It is surprising. Mm-hmm. That said, I think we are a growing city. We're going to need other options. And like I said, the more people we bring in, we can't just say, well, we're a car city, because we're going to get more traffic. You're going to be stuck in traffic longer. We need other options. And other councillors who voted with the mayor saying, well, it's going to be years before any uptake of this, but we need it in place. If we keep pushing it off, we're never going to get it in place. Then we're never going to have uptake, and we're always going to be a car city with bad traffic. I think it's a tough pill to swallow, but as a growing city, if we want to be a world-class city, we need to make these investments, even when they go over budget, because a lot of our municipal costs, they go over budget, and most people for roadway things, they don't bat an eye. They don't pause.
How much over budget, Brian? How much, Brian, is acceptable? 200 million, 300 million, 400 million? What's the number?
No, you're right, and that's the thing. I don't think there is a solid line for, okay, once it gets to this, we stop. The fact is as a growing city, do we need it? And I think, there's a lot of people saying, well, almost no one ever bikes. Well, just because you don't see them doesn't mean we're there. I bike, I drive as well. I pay my taxes. I pay taxes for the roadways. Yeah. I want to use it. I drive my car quite a bit. Yeah. But yesterday, driving from Crichton Park in downtown Dartmouth to the Sportsplex, it's a 7-minute bike ride tops. Twice on my bike, I was run off the road by cars not looking, not seeing me, and trying to turn and running me off the road. I have to slam on my brakes, let them go. Yeah. So, yes, I believe you're not seeing people, but a lot of people aren't looking either. We're out there, we're riding our bikes, we're driving. I think it's fair that we should be able to do it in protected ways in certain corridors of the city.
Brian, let me ask you this question. You kind of discounted anecdotal evidence, and I agree that empirical data is more effective and always the best measure. But the anecdotal evidence to a point is not completely discounted, and public sentiment is not completely discounted as well. But for example, we had a transit driver on earlier. I don't know if you heard him or not, but he drives transit around the city, knows the city well, and knows these issues well because he lives it. I think you'd agree that a transit driver would be somebody who could speak to with effectiveness on this issue. So some anecdotal evidence is effective, and some common sense is applicable, is it not?
It absolutely is. But in making these decisions that will affect our city for years, I think you have to bring the data and bring the hard figures And as this, let's say, who knows, for a year, 2 years, 3 years, that's going to affect our city and our growing city. So yeah, I think, yes, there's that anecdotal evidence. Gather that in an official way. Do studies, do reports with that evidence, but just pausing it based on what people's feelings are. Again, I think people who call into your show a lot seem to have very strong feelings against bikers, against bike lanes, not just saying pause it, but get rid of them altogether. I think that, that's not enough to say, well, let's not move forward on this just because it's different than what you've been used to your whole life here in the city. I think we do need that data. If it is causing congestion, great. Let's get the data and let's pause it then if we think this is really a net negative. But that hasn't been presented, and it's really right now based on the feelings of people going, I feel that it's more congested. And again, it is, but it's a lot of other factors, like many more people in the city than there were 5 years ago, all of whom are driving.
Okay, Brian, good comments. Thanks for your call. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Sandra, hello.
Sorry, Todd, swallowing my coffee. Good day.
Hi.
Everybody complaining all the time about bike lanes. And I'm sorry I didn't hear the beginning of the show, but you did mention a transit driver did call in. I am one myself. I wish I had heard what they had said. But, I drive around the city all day, and honestly, the bike lanes are not the issue. The concrete barriers at the corners of streets are off. If we can, maneuver around all these barriers, why are people in cars complaining about it? It makes no sense. And like you said, and I thank you for mentioning, transit drivers are a good example of someone who knows what the congestion is all about in this city.
Sure.
But my problem, and I see it constantly, and it's been on my mind for years. 12,000 people entered this province last year. Most of them are probably living in the metro area. And what bothers me is developers have come into this city, bought up land, have torn down, everything that was on that land, including the trees, which bothers me more than anything. But why hasn't the city acted, in a proactive manner and required the developers to give up maybe even 5% of their property to extended sidewalks and bike lanes? And, I see these developments going up on every corner of our streets in the city, and they don't even widen sidewalks. They have millions and millions. It costs a minimum of $300 million to build these places. And the city, if they were proactive and interested in a viable future for our city, should require a percentage of their land be allocated to pedestrian and bicycle use. And even if it is just a lane here and there, it's better than nothing. We cannot handle any more vehicles in this city. It just is not possible. And again, they are the ones with the money. And, the city has just allowed them to do pretty much whatever they want with their space when it comes to developing these condos and mid-rises and high-rises. And I just don't understand the people complaining about bike lanes all the time. Like I say, I know I'm driving the city streets all day long. And you know what I really think should happen? I think the public school system, the educators and the physical education instructors should organize bike rallies with parents, school educators, and the children, and start driving around the streets of Halifax and show this city that bike lanes are necessary. And no one ever mentions people 16 years of age and under. And so what about these children? And why they can't even imagine driving a bike around the city because there's nowhere that's safe for them to do it. And people talk about the bike lanes in Montreal and things that have been done in Toronto. And, there's clear evidence that it does work. But we just have this mentality in this city that, no one drives bicycles, and it's not true. And they go on about 3 and 4 months of the year where anybody wouldn't be on a bike at all, and the hills in the city.
Well, Sandra, that's legitimate. I mean, come on, let's not completely discount that. The weather's crappy and icy for 5 months of the year. I mean, that's a factor. It is.
I see bicyclists driving 12 months of the year.
I don't know many that would, quite honestly. You're talking about marathon bikers, because I tell you, anyway, Sandra, listen, I'll let you go. I think that's a factor. To discount the climate, folks, I think you're grasping at straws with that one. Mike, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Well, you?
Good. First-time caller, and I'm just calling with regards to the bike lanes. I'm an old guy and don't bike, so I guess that can be factored into it. But I can't fathom. I never see a biker. I drive a ton, but I never see a bike rider on the roads. I just wonder if we seem to be skirting it because we do have big issues, but why would we not look at, and I know it's a small number to start, but spending that $100 million or $200 million to improve our transit? We already have bus lanes and so forth. Would the transit not make much more sense 12 months a year? Whatever the cost is, as everybody said, we have tons of people coming to Halifax to HRM. Yeah. They're all taxpayers. They all have the opportunity, the right to travel around the city. If we put I know the 100 or 200 million, I don't know what that number is, but it's a constant. You could add to it each year and develop a much, much better transit system that people would choose to leave their cars at home and travel on the transit system if it were good enough.
Yeah, Mike. Mike, I think if you were to say, look, you can have one or the other, and it's not one or the other, but let's suggest that if you were to say you can have a great transit system and no bikes, or a fantastic bike network and no transit, it's a no-brainer every time you take the transit system every single time. And so I agree with you 100% that it makes a lot of sense to invest in transit. That's going to benefit a lot more people. Disabled people, the elderly, outlying areas, and on it goes. And that was part of Mayor Fillmore's comments, is let's get transit more effective as part of this process. And I agree with that. I think somebody would have a hard time putting up a good argument against that.
Well, like I said, the reality is with the bus lanes, trying to make room for bike lanes, I don't think both work. I don't think we have a necessity or the demand for the bike lanes that comes across. So I think if the transit were expanded, and it's going to cost a lot of money, but if we had a decent, maybe world-class transit system, so many of us would not have to use bike lanes, would not have to walk, and would enjoy using a transit system.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your comments. All right, take care. Listen, I agree with that 100%. Look, what's more important to a municipality, an effective, reliable transit system or bike lanes? And I'm not saying you can't have both, but let's suggest that you want to make one of those two a priority. To me, it makes sense that you would focus on transit. To me, that just makes sense. And that's not being anti-cyclist, or that's just looking at this logically. Jeff, hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm well, you?
No, not too bad. I am with the mayor on this one. I think that you spend $100 million. I looked up the numbers. Our budget for all of our buses for the entire year is like $83 million or $84 million, something like that, which is $205,000 per bus. That means there's about 330 some buses on the road, and you can Google all this. But if you took $100 million and said, okay, we're just going to invest it and use a 5%, for instance, for return, you would pay for 25 extra buses every year and never touch your $100 million.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things where you have to make some financial sense. Our city was built in 1750. It's like we basically have tiny, short little roads that were made for horses and carriages, and we can't have bus lanes, bike lanes, car lanes, everything all at once in some of these streets. Now, I was driving out of downtown last night, which was, a major pain in the butt yesterday because there was an accident on Quimpool. During that time, I watched a couple of bicycles down on University Avenue not take the bike lane. They rode right into the main lane.
Yeah.
There was other ones that will not give me 3 feet of space. If I'm in between a parked car in the lane and there's 2 feet of space between me and the other car, a bicycle will go right up between me and the other car.
Yeah.
Now, they don't have insurance. They have no liability, so they scratched the side of my new car. Guess what? Too bad.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? It's like, I will give a bicycle 3 feet of space no matter what. Their safety is important, yes. But when it boils down to it, even some of the city planning, they could put bike lanes in some places. Instead of repainting Herring Cove Road, they spent $1 million putting trees in the middle of the road, and putting islands in the middle of the roads and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, that was when all the bike lanes were happening. So instead of paying $100,000 to repaint the roads and have a bicycle lane on each side, they dug up the street, put islands in the middle. There is space for everybody, but when it boils down to it, the percentage of people that are in a car year round because they have to, or the percentage of people in a bus far outweighs the amount of people on a bicycle. And to spend that kind of budget on bicycles alone is getting a little ridiculous.
Okay, Jeff, I appreciate your time. Thanks for the call.
No problem.
All right, take care. Good calls today, folks, on both sides, which is good. We'll open the phone lines again tomorrow between 11 and 12. AI can help mitigate shrinking labor force by increasing productivity of existing workers and adding new ones. This is according to a report from the Fraser Institute. We'll discuss it when we come back. All right, as Canada's labor force shrinks due to aging and slowing rates of immigration, artificial intelligence can help by increasing the number of available workers and improving worker productivity, finds a new study published by the Fraser Institute. Joining us to discuss all of this is Steve Globerman, Senior Fellow with the Fraser Institute and editor of the Institute's latest series on artificial intelligence. Stephen, thanks for joining the show.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, so first of all, let's tell us, I guess, AI is a pretty broad term when we use that. What falls under the umbrella of AI? Describe, if you will, how this technology in general, in the context of what we're discussing here, please.
Well, in general, it's taking information that is usually taken from the internet, and it creates intelligent bots or machines that will respond to questions or do tasks. It uses all kinds of media, voice, images, sound, and basically translates that information into a response that you're looking for as the user.
Okay, so how much of a presence or an impact does it currently have in the workforce? Do we know that? Are we measuring that? And that number is obviously going to go up. But are we looking at these metrics?
I'm sorry, I'm not. We don't have a good connection here. I'm not able to hear your questions.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right. So how much of a presence does AI now have in the workforce? I know that's a broad question, but kind of broadly speaking.
Well, the majority of companies are using AI. They're using them, though, at this point in time for very specific applications. In other words, It's not being used across all corporate activities. It's typically being used for things like marketing, customer service, and accounting applications. But obviously, that's going to change over time. It's going to be much more broadly used.
Okay, so how is the implementation of AI going to improve the workers and improve the amount of jobs and availability to employment for people?
Well, this particular essay, which I edited, it was written by a professor at the University of Toronto. The takeoff point for his essay is that rather than having a surplus of labor, going forward, Canada is looking at significant scarcity of labor. This part you mentioned earlier, it's aging of the workforce, it's slowing down of immigration. And so the problem that he suggests we're facing is how do we get more labor given the number of people? And his argument is that AI is going to do it. One way is to improve productivity, so you're getting more output per worker, which is really equivalent to creating, if you will, more workers. The second is to help employers and employees better match the skills to the employer's needs, so that you don't have people who are underemployed, that is, doing jobs for which they're overskilled. They could be doing more somewhere else. The third point he mentions is that there are a lot of people who aren't able to be in the labor force right now for various reasons, disabilities, location. They're not located where the job is. They may only want part-time work. AI is, he argues, is a way of overcoming a lot of those difficulties. And he goes into some discussion of how that's going to happen.
All right. Get into some of that. How will it happen?
Well, for example, AI is being used in to improve mobility. You think about autonomous cars, autonomous taxis, which are coming, which enable people who ordinarily couldn't be mobile on their own, right. Makes it easier for them to move around. People who might have difficulty hearing or seeing, AI can basically be an assist in that way, it's also, I think, basically making people, well, for example, people who don't have English or French as their primary language, these translating programs that AI is producing enables them to be in the workforce. And that's a big factor because language proficiency is an important asset to have, obviously.
Okay, how does it help overskilled workers get better match for jobs? How does AI do that?
By having essentially a board, if you will, a computer board where employers can specify more precisely what kind of skills they want and to be able to test those skills in real time. So if I say I can do X, Y, and Z activities, how does my employer know I can do those things? Well, if I can go online and go to a dashboard where I can actually interact with the employer online to show that I can do certain skills, it makes that matching process more efficient. Now, obviously, there are other ways of doing it. I could fly to the employer's location and do an interview, but the point is that this is more efficient, it's faster in real time, and it can probably be more precise.
Okay, AI, I think when it comes to like contact centers or customer relations, the calling to book hotels or whatever, things like that, AI, I think would be, in those cases, replacing humans, would it not?
Yeah, it has been for a while. I mean, we've had call centers where they've had voice, bots basically doing that for a while. Yes, but the point is again that AI, the key word is intelligence in AI. It can do a better job. It can handle more complex types of interactions with customers autonomously. That is, without a human interface.
Okay, so productivity. How does it make people more productive? AI.
Well, any number of ways. It saves people time in doing routine work. For example, in my case, I do, what I do mostly is research. I do writing. AI can locate sources of information for me faster than I could do it by doing, kind of standard Google searches, right? Rather than my looking at these articles online and saying, well, is this relevant to what I'm doing or not? The AI algorithm, as say in Google search now, Gemini, will tell me which articles are relevant. If I say I'm doing research on this particular subject, the AI search engine will then say, okay, here are 3 articles that are most relevant to what you're doing. So what does it do? It saves me an awful lot of time, and I can spend more time thinking about the problem that I'm researching, less time looking for the background information that I'd like to have. That's just an example.
Yeah, to me though, and I'm not suggesting that it's not a good thing. And look, it's the genie's out of the bottle. Obviously, we're moving forward with AI. We're not going to. You can't reverse it. I'm not suggesting we should. But to me, that's going to result in the elimination of quite a few jobs, at least initially. It may make the jobs that are left more productive, and I can see the advantage. But I could see a lot of jobs going by the wayside. I already see it. Like you said, translators, people who used to have to go through documents and used to have to write for meetings. I just see a lot of jobs disappearing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so let me just say that the Fraser Institute published a study. I wrote it actually a few months ago, which looked at previous episodes of major innovations like the telephone, the computer, the internet, and looked at what happened to the labor market. And yes, of course, there are certain jobs that are going to disappear. So let's take your example. So let's say we have really good and quick AI translating features in iPhones and the like. Okay, yes, that might mean less work for translators, but if you think about it, it also means a lot more international commerce. It's easier for people who speak different languages to do business together. Well, that suggests there's going to be all kinds of new jobs created related to that new business, and that's what happened with the internet. The internet was a major facilitator of international business. So you had all kinds of jobs opening up in trade, and including trade negotiators, but people who would do logistics, international logistics, senior managers. Yes, the short answer is jobs are lost, but the evidence is more jobs in the end are created than are lost. There are different types of jobs.
How about government oversight? And we've got a federal minister, Evan Solomon, who oversees AI now. What about federal oversight when it comes to AI? How much federal government involvement should there be?
Well, that's a difficult question because, it really depends on what's your worry about AI. I think for right now, there's a lot of concern emerging about intellectual property rights, copyright protection, specifically in areas like music and even just using information created by other people, using it to create AI algorithms. Well, okay, that's an issue. Do we need separate legislation to deal with it, or the existing copyright laws and patent laws and trade secret laws, did they just need to be strengthened a little bit to deal with this new source of potential problem? There's safety issues. But again, there's a lot of legislation already on the books that can deal with problems created by AI, and I think what the government needs to be concerned about is, are they creating redundant legislation, or in fact legislation that's going to be more harmful than good in terms of slowing down the adoption of AI?
Steve, an interesting chat. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
All right, take care. Stephen Globerman, Senior Fellow with the Fraser Institute and editor of the Institute's latest series on artificial intelligence. The Disability Rights Coalition is calling for strong provincial government action to catch up on legally binding deadlines. We'll talk about this with an advocate when we come back. The Disability Rights Coalition is calling for strong provincial government action to catch up on legally binding deadlines in the human rights remedy regarding the disability support program. Joining us to discuss all of this is Vicky Levack, disability advocate. Vicky, thanks for joining the show as always.
Thank you for having me, Todd.
All right, you got it. So let's talk about, I guess, back to the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal and its ruling back in 2021. What did it rule, first of all?
That the Nova Scotia government was discriminating against people with disabilities in regards to social assistance and social support by saying they had to live in certain places or that they were deemed too disabled or not disabled enough to receive services. So really, it's not just the DSP that needs to change, it's the entire government in regards to how we support people with disabilities.
Okay, in its most recent progress report and documentation released late May, it posted to the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission website. The province acknowledged falling behind on several critical court-mandated targets in the remedy, which include only about two-thirds of the number of individuals who supposed to have left segregated institutions for persons with disabilities by this point in the remedy have done so. So that leaves a full third still in this desperate situation, which is you've experienced yourself, right?
Yes, for 10 years I was put in an institution against my will.
Wow, and it feels like incarceration, no doubt, right?
It is incarceration. There is no feels about it. It is incarceration. And if you speak to providers of institutions, some of them refer to themselves as formerly incarcerated, and I would say that is correct.
Why? What is the delay in getting the other third taken care of here? What's going on? Is it a lack of resources, or what's going on here?
Well, the province has said, and I tend to believe them, that they needed to get the groundwork covered because this was an entire new system. So they had to get the groundwork underway, and now they've said they've done that. So they feel that it can go faster now that they have all the underlying behind-the-scenes stuff that the public does not see in place. So we at the GRC look forward to making sure that happens. And again, it's not just one or two departments that are responsible for this. For this, DSP is obviously the lead, but this involves all levels of government provincially. So you have Department of Health, Department of Justice and Corrections, Department of Mental Health and Addiction. Those all fall under the remedy as well.
Okay, no progress has been made in moving adults, or virtually no progress in moving adults under the age of 65 out of long-term care facilities. There are now 476 adults under 65 in long-term care facilities, compared to 424 at the start of the remedy. Only 6% of the spaces were supposed to be created in a program jointly created by the Disability Support Program and the Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care. So this is obviously unacceptable for a lot of reasons, right?
It is, yes. And those numbers, I'd like them to be re-examined because that's every person in long-term care that's under 65. That doesn't necessarily mean they sit in the DSP program. Like there's some people with dementia who would not thrive without those supports. So we need more accurate numbers on that. But the fact that it has gone up, it is very disturbing. This is correct. And for a personal reason, obviously, am very passionate about this particular issue. And it is deeply saddening for me. And I am very angry, yes.
I don't blame you at all. And the province has fallen well behind requirements for the recruitment of staff for disability support program. The province has hired 52% of the staff into a role required by the remedy called local area coordinators, and 37% of the staff required to fill a role referred to as intensive planning and support coordinators.
Yes.
So tell us that the statistics speak for themselves, but why is this troubling to you?
It's troubling because, well, obviously you need the more staff you have, the better, and I hope that the province, the province will get a little more creative on how they recruit these folks. Because right now, obviously, it's not enough, so they have to obviously come up with a new strategy to recruit folks, and they may have to do that in some creative ways, such as paying for moving expenses, looking outside the province, maybe. If I don't know what they have to do to recruit people. There are people literally whose job it is to help them figure that out. And I wish them the best of luck with that. But they have to be more, obviously, and they've said this, they have to get a little creative about how they recruit.
Okay, Vicky, thank you for your time. As always, we appreciate your continuing hard work on all of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, Todd.
All right, take care. Vicky Levack, disability advocate. Transparency advocates call for independent review of Access to Information Act federally. We'll talk to Duff Conacher of Democracy Watch when we come back.